Hey, Radar, come here. Come on, let's go in. There we go. Good job, come on.
The stories of those who live in the Matsu Borough are as varied as the people themselves. Some you have heard. Some perhaps you have not. This is Voices of the Matsu, bringing our stories to life.
This podcast is about the importance of community because when it all comes down to it, a community that knows itself takes care of itself.
Well, hello, and you might notice that this is not the voice of Emily Forstner. I'm David Cheesem, and this month we're wrapping up 2 years of Voices of the Matsu with Emily Forstner. That's 2 years of Emily's unique approach to storytelling, driven by empathy and deep listening. Now, usually, as you know, Emily does the interviewing, but this time we're turning the tables and interviewing her instead. Emily makes interviewing sound so easy, masking all the hard work that goes into the job. Well, here's a clue. We decided that we needed 2 people to carry the weight that Emily usually carries. So joining me along with Emily is David Shield.
Hello, David. Hello, Emily. We call this episode Unforgettable. Emily, you've lived in Palmer for quite a while. Over the last 24 months, you have had a look at the community from the perspective of residents, city employees, and city leaders. What would you like the listeners to know about the perspectives you've gained?
I have tremendous respect for this community, but I've also gained a lot of respect for podcasters. I was offered this grant position for telling stories on the radio. It'd be a podcast about once a month. I thought, everybody has a podcast. How hard could this be? Well, I tell you what, the joke's on me. My dog knew better. He has spent hours and hours on the floor of Studio B. We call him Radar, Radio Dog. And they say if you're going to start a podcast, never begin with the long-form narrative. So that's what I did.
So what were some of the challenges you faced early on?
Well, first off, let's be clear. The challenges found in the intricacies of producing a radio podcast is a whole lot more than talking into a mic and pressing record. The amount of focus that it takes was definitely a challenge for me. That's not one of my strong suits, is focus. But I had to learn how to do it. And the other thing that was really a challenge was narration. Because you're supposed to talk in front of this mic like you're talking to someone in the living room, but there is no living room. And it's just you in the studio. Maybe Radar is with me, but just me in the studio. And so I kind of had stage fright in front of this mic. It's weird.
Creating a podcast involves a lot of skills. What was it like producing that first podcast?
Oh, the first. We never forget our first. Our first car, our first day, as a teacher, our first classroom, and the first podcast. I asked Mary Jo Parks, my friend, she's volunteer extraordinaire, to come in and tell the story of Special Santa. She started it in 1997 as a classroom service project. They helped 90 kids get Christmas presents. It's 30 years old now. It has served and given presents to over 3,000 students and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in donations. But the real story behind that wasn't about the presents.
But we all have a need to do something and to make our community better. And out of that also, you begin to realize that you have a need to be needed. And Special Santa is that perfect place where people came in and started getting involved, and they feel needed. I talk about, I didn't know when I started this, first of all, that it would ever get so big, but I didn't know how much people needed to give. The moral of the story is that people need to be needed and know that they're valued.
And the other thing about that first podcast that I'll never forget is that I didn't look at the board, and it was with a hot mic. And so I had to do it all over again. And fortunately, Mary Jo's really nice.
for the listener's reference, when Emily says the board, she is referring to the sound control box, and a hot mic means a really distorted mic.
It's amazing to hear this because when we listen to your show, like I said before, it sounds very easy.
No, it wasn't, and I don't keep wanting to harp on that because it's been a joy, and I've really have enjoyed it. But it has been a learning curve, and I think one of the biggest things that for me to take away is none of us are smarter than all of us, and this podcast wasn't going to be any better than myself without some sort of collaboration, and so it started to take off and get better when we formed what I call the editorial board. And that was with you, David, and Lee Hendrickson, who, pretty much runs this radio station, and with Carrie Bowling, who's sound magician. That's when this podcast started being good. And that's hands down. Carrie got us on Spotify, Apple, and all places that you listen to podcasts.
This program is brought to you by Big Cabbage Radio in Palmer, Alaska.
And then I met Emma Keachley. And she was a volunteer at the Winter Arctic Games, a junior in high school. And I saw an opportunity. I said, hey, would you like to work with sound editing with the podcast? And she said, sure. I said, well, listen, you think about it. Here's my card. Give me a call. And you know what? She did. And then she showed up. And she keeps showing up.
Because I want to do it a little
So I think that's one of the things that has made this sound easy, because I didn't do it by myself.
Hold on.
You interviewed a lot of people. You spent a lot of time with those people. What did you learn about listening?
Well, we can hear a lot, but listen little. And I think if you're going to be really telling someone else's story responsibly, you have to listen to what they're not saying. And that's maybe more feeling than listening. You can't be so intent on getting your next question answered that as they talk, you're thinking about what you're going to say next. And so the storytelling and the interviews I did with people took probably an hour or more. And then from that, we cut it down to 25 minutes because listening takes time.
There's a sense that we all have of kind of living in a bubble. We all have our own friends and acquaintances. But you couldn't do this show just with the people you knew. You had to break out of that bubble. Any examples of that you want to talk about?
I think that's a really good point. The mission behind the grant was to tell stories of those who are often unheard. And so you were forced to look beyond what you knew. Like my dad always said, you like what you know, but do you know what you like? And so we had to always kind of look beyond that. So there's a couple, and one's Julie Bouchard. And I met her while I was doing a story with Rabbi Greenberg, which was another excellent person to meet. And she said, I've got a story for you to... And I go, great. How cool is that? I didn't have to look for it. Well, it was crushing.
Losing a child to fentanyl is the hardest thing I've ever done and had to go through.
911, what's your emergency, please?
I will never forget Julie and her, I want to say bravery, on how do you continue? How do you go on with life after losing your son to fentanyl?
And I answered, and she didn't say hello or anything. She just screamed out, "Mom, Tag's dead."
And so we called in Dr. Ann Zink to add expert information about fentanyl with this very sad story of a young man's overdose.
Someone who takes a pill that's highly concentrated in fentanyl, it may take 10, 15 minutes before that medication would be enough to kick in and someone could stop breathing.
And I was like, what? I was in complete shock. Like, how did this happen? What happened?
Carrie Bowling lent you a portable mic to record on location, and you used it effectively for episodes such as the show I Can't See You.
That is a story of 6 senior citizens who lost their sight late in life. And I really did try to include all 6 voices. But it did show me that we're not in control of everything. And sometimes things just happen to us. And their stories of losing balance, literally, and their independence, but how they keep going is unforgettable.
When I lost my sight, the only way I can explain it, the word, is that I was paralyzed. I mean, just paralyzed. Like I couldn't move. I couldn't see TV. I couldn't see anything.
And with that portable mic, I was able to go on location. And when I'm on location, I think that delivers a sign of respect. You're sharing your story. It takes time. I'll come to you.
And being able to record on location was a game changer in lots of ways, like with the story of David Anderson in the episode Second Chance.
And I met him through Second Chance.
This program is a safety net for those in most need of a lot of support re-entering society.
Charities, which is supported by Matsu Health Foundation. And he was recently released from prison. And so with the portable mic that Carrie gave me, I was able to go on location, go exactly to David's apartment. And we're in his studio apartment, and he pulls out his phone, and he goes, "This would be my theme song."
Don't give up. You gotta trust. And that word there that's key for me is trust. Because I come from a background where I couldn't trust anybody.
Which is a Christian song about going through the woods, and how that inspires him to keep going.
How do I discern who I can trust? To this day, that's an assessment I still make.
And I'm going to tell you, if you have never been in an ex-convict's first studio apartment, listening to his theme song on a cell phone, you're missing out.
And it's just the Lord is singing over us. And the longer you're in there, the more alone you are.
That makes us so much better.
You found stories in unlikely places, like in Strike a Chord, which was far outside the studio.
Far outside of the studio. I was in the Wrangell Mountains. I was taking a trip with a lady named Marissa. And she was telling me how she is no longer a mountain guide. She's settled in Palmer with a full-time job. She has a house, completely different than her life that she knew. And where did she find community? At the Fishhook Bar and Grill.
When I heard the warden say...
She always wanted to play the guitar. She went to the Fishhook Bar and Grill. There's a jam on Tuesdays. This welcoming group of old men playing guitar and whatnot welcomes her in, teaches her how to sing, teaches her how to play the guitar, and she found a home.
And the other thing I would say is that this is one of the more supportive communities I have been a part of.
Now that is a story. And then later on, we brought her into the studio with two of her mentors, and we hear her sing, and they play music together, and it's really heartwarming. So I think listening, when you learn to listen, you just hear so many wonderful things.
That's amazing, and that was such a good episode. I really loved hearing
it was
that.
Fun.
Emily, I've heard you say the most endearing stories come in the most unusual forms, like in the story Bonus Families.
But they're real kids. They're real kids, just like every other kid on the planet. It's universal.
Elizabeth called in from her Subaru in her driveway because she couldn't come into the studio. She had me in tears.
Do very well. It is a broken system, and that's why they need a lot of just real people loving kids well.
She calls herself a bonus mom.
And I tell them, hey, you get a bonus family. We are your bonus family. And I'm so thankful that our stories came together, that now we know each other too.
What an inspirational story about a foster mom who believes in kinship.
Yeah, well, not how could I do fostering? How could I do something? I just wanted to do what's the most good I could do. And so I realized fostering would be a good, if I'm a mom and I do mom 24/7, I can do more mom. I could certainly have more kids.
There's two examples besides bonus mom. One's with Devin Shaw. I called him in to talk about Black History Month. He grew up as a young black man in Palmer. What was it like?
That man looked at me and he leans forward. He's like, "What's your name?" I was like, "My name's Devin." And he's like, "You know what, Devin? You're the first nigger I've ever had in my house." He said, "But I like you." And that was the end of the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was a lot of that growing up.
But that story, as I listened, wasn't about Black History Month at all.
Black History Month, you learn about Martin Luther King. You learn about Rosa Parks. You learn about what happened with the bus boycotts. And then that's about it. And then we move on to the next month.
It was about his music. and how he uses his music to bridge racial divides, stereotypes, and prejudices.
I'm the last son of Johnny Shaw. You might not feel comfortable with me walking in your house and telling you that, but you'll listen to a black artist that'll explain to you my experience. You might be fearful, you know what I'm saying? For the people that are fearful who clutch your purse when you walk past a black person on the street, but you'll listen to Jay-Z. Music has always had a way of breaking down barriers easier than any other form of media.
And through the Families in Transition program at the Mat-Su School District, I was linked up with a woman named Melissa, who had lost her husband and moved up here from South Carolina and found herself living in a car with her 2 teenage children behind Vagabond Blues.
I had that cushion that you can buy to put on like a topper for your bed, and I had cut it so that we could fit it in the back, and I would throw all of the trash bag that I had grabbed and put it up front, and then we would go into the back like sardines, and I would pray.
What we think is a good idea, the rug can be pulled out from underneath us.
Not everybody is in the situation because they put themselves there. You have things that happen outside of your control. I mean, honestly, I'm working multiple jobs to try to keep the place that I have now, and it would just take me losing one of them.
She has since found a home and has actually opened up her home to people without homes. And I have come to find that this community is far more diverse than we think.
You know, it's the only thing that stinks is grief and fear hit you at night.
Melissa's story has never left me.
What are some stories you're particularly proud of, Emily?
I would regret not mentioning the episode called Welcome. And this, again, was a chance to use that portable mic. And I interviewed a refugee from Ukraine. And he had come over here with his family. Why did he come? And to learn that his business, a very, very successful oil business, he'd been run out of it by the Russian mafia.
And they came to my company place and robbed. They beat people and broke all locks, put their own locks, put their own guardian there. Tell us bye-bye.
And he'd had to move to Poland. And when that wasn't working out, he really wanted to take his family back to Ukraine. But he hears on the radio that it's been invaded.
And looks at phone. What is this?
And there is no place for him to go. So he is sponsored by a family here and comes to Alaska, and he makes it. And he's working now at Catholic Social Services as a refugee, helping refugees.
I think that every American can understand that he or his father, mother, grandfather, grandmother also were refugee sometime. And you can also be refugee, for example, in 1 year, in 1 month, in 1 day. Nobody knows what will happen in 1 hour, or 1 day, or 1 month, or 1 year. You can be also refugees in 1 minute.
It's a haunting story. You know, this could happen to you.
Think about that.
I do want to say the stories I am most proud of, I think, are the stories that I was able to tell about a sense of place. All of our stories have settings, and I think the question is, can you separate our places from our stories? You know, the chicken or the egg, which came first? So I looked at this thing called third places. That's the place we choose. We've got our first place home, our second place is our work or our school, and the third place is where we choose to go. And these are very, very important to community. I think if we look at the internet and the phones and this isolation, it's because we've lost our third place. So there's a third place down the street. This is Palmer Bar. And a community member came to me and said, hey, the Palmer Bar is the business of the year. You need to do a story on him. And I go, a bar? You know, business of the year? Yeah, I'm interested.
The Palmer Bar was established in 1936. And, you know, it's always been the place across the tracks. That's really what we've tried to do, is maintain. We want it to feel the same way when it turns 100 years old in 14 years as it does today when we bought it or the day we bought it. So we're trying to keep that same atmosphere, and that is a lot of community and history.
And I recorded the regulars.
Why do you come to the Palmer Bar?
Because it's a family-friendly location where we can come and feel like we're at home. It's almost like a local version of Cheers, where everybody knows your name, absolutely, and everybody knows our kids' names.
And from there, I realized there's lots of perspectives to a story.
I think there's this negative attitude that follows the idea of being a bartender and the idea of serving alcohol and the idea of working for tips as kind of, in a way, this idea of selling yourself. I'm not doing that. I'm not here trying to get everybody drunk at the end of the day. We have to remember, this is a small community.
But my next one, and I think this is my personal favorite, is the Moose Range.
The Moose Range is a 130,000-acre wood north of Palmer. Over the years, it has become a popular recreation area, well known for its multi-use from skiers to sleds to trappers.
So I wanted to explore this. I've known it ever since I've moved to Palmer. So how has this place changed over time? And can we separate our stories from our place?
You just stepped out your door and you went for a walk, or you went for a ski, or you got on your bike and you could go if you wanted to be outside.
I interviewed people in terms of time. Who was there at the beginning of the Moose Range in the early 80s?
We already had a name for it. We already just went, let's go out to the swamp, let's go out to this trail, let's go up to the woodcut. It was woodcut because we could harvest firewood there. It had a lot of different uses and different names.
Who moved in the 90s? Who moved in the 2000s?
I think a lot of people hope that it won't change from an outside.
And who uses it now? And how has it changed? And how has their impression changed? And how has their ownership sense of the Moose Range changed?
Yeah, I see lots and lots of new faces, which I think is awesome. I'm seeing a lot, what I've noticed too is a lot more families out there, which is always great to see.
As I was listening and working with it, it ended up being a love story.
And I think of this throughout every year probably, is there's an area in the Moose Range that Sharon Powder and Howie Powder had lawn chairs where they would recreate, and then they would pull their lawn chairs out and watch the sunset. And I don't know, it was just a picture of love of each other and love of the Moose Range. And it just says it all. I wish I had a photo because it's in my head for sure.
That one? Yeah, the Moose Range. I love this story. It is my story. It's called Our Place.
Our Place.
Our Place. We share places.
Emily, this is your trademark, the one-word question. One word. Just one word.
You know, I loved asking that question. It is really hard when you're asked it. One word. Let me think. I would, off the top, community. Community was somebody's one word over and over again. Community. Community service. The garbage man of Palmer, Dumpster Dave, what's your one word? Community service. Who knew? And hope. But my one word, I think it's home. Home. And I will never forget the Barber's Kitchen by the Moose Range. And Mr. Barber is a big MEA lineman. And they drive snow machines, and I don't drive snow machines. And I asked him one word. And he goes,
"It's home.
It's my home."
It's my home. I'm comfortable here.
He's crying. His wife's crying. I'm crying. Because it is.
And it's our home.
And as much as I bellyache and complain about this place in January, it's home. And it's a very good place to be.
It's worked this long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make it last longer, that's for sure.
A community that knows itself, takes care of itself. Voices of the Mat-Su has shared stories filled with leaps of faith, places that make it our own, and stories heard when you stop long enough to listen.
When someone shares their story, it becomes a treasure. It's entrusted in your care. I do not take that responsibility lightly. It was a joy sharing stories. I like to tell stories. I like to hear stories. But it really is an honor And since stories shape us and they hold a community together, I think it's very important that we are careful with each other's stories. These people opened their hearts.
And he loved me. And he danced with me in our kitchen. He showed me Otis Redding and all of these old records and this music that I would never have listened to.
They shared their bravery.
Pack up and they leave and they say, oh, I'm going to stay at my parents. I'm going to go stay at my friends. And so I was doing that. And I was doing it while I was pregnant, and I was doing it with a newborn baby while I was working full time. It did not, up until it did, cross my mind to stand my ground on anything.
They offered their wisdom.
Just don't do it alone. It was never meant to be done alone.
It has been unforgettable.
Amazing. That would be the word I'd use.
That's a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Emily. You're not only a great interviewer, you're a great interviewee as well. And I want to say thanks again to the Mat-Su Health Foundation for supporting this series. It's been a wonderful ride, and nothing but good to say.
There's been plenty of times where I felt trapped and I had no voice, and that's all I ever wanted to do was be able to communicate how my heart is experiencing the world.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you,
David Cheesem. And thank you, Mat-Su.
Okay, let's go.
This was Voices of the Mat-Su, sharing stories told by those who live in the Mat-Su borough. To revisit this and past stories, go to bigcabbageradio.org. This project is funded by a grant from the Mat-Su Health Foundation and is produced by Emily Forstner for Big Cabbage Radio. The views expressed in Voices of the Mat-Su do not represent the views of Big Cabbage Radio or the Mat-Su Health Foundation. Comments or questions about this show may be sent to voices@bigcabbageradio.org.
Thanks for listening. You stay well out there.